Welcome in, I'm Artris, and at the time that this video releases, EB-02 is only a day away, and I believe that EB-02 is a big enough impact on the meta that it deserves a little bit of a quick shifting around of the tier list based off of the new support that a lot of these leaders get. Now, I don't think this tier list video needs to be like an hour long of me yapping about all and every leader. I do think that there are some significant changes for a few leaders, but overall, the majority of the pack remains the same. What you see before you, of course, is the tier list that I had for the start of OP10 with the ban list in place, and I think that most of these are correct, but I do want to go through them rather quickly and see what has changed based off of the new support. And of course, before we go over the tier list, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to drop a sub. And also, if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps out the channel so much. Thank you all for the support. Additionally, if you'd like to talk about the One Piece card game outside of the YouTube comments, make sure to join the Discord. The link for that is in the description below. So it's not going to be any surprise to anybody here. I'm going to go ahead and just get the elephant out of the room. The new leader, Green Purple Luffy, is definitely going to be an S tier deck. I don't know if it's going to be the top of the S tier. I think the biggest thing that's going to be holding this deck back is actually the price point and the accessibility to the cards themselves. This deck is mostly consisted of EB-02 cards, and I know a lot of people are having trouble getting the cards themselves just because it's like a short supply, or maybe like the prices are too expensive. I know that if you're trying to get like alt arts of this deck, it's going to be ridiculous, but that being said, if you are able to get your hands on this deck and pilot it, it is a very strong deck, being able to minus Dawn, but get that Dawn back. And then also with cards like Sanji and Pudding, you're actually not minusing Dawn, and you're really just putting a whole bunch of bodies on the field, ramping up. Your leader's a 6k leader for an entire turn cycle. It's pretty nasty, and I understand why it took the meta by storm in the East when it came out. However, we've had some time to like deliberate, think about it over here in the West, and kind of figure out what would be the best answers to GP Luffy. Regardless, it will be the meta deck for everybody to be looking out for. I would expect this to be a big portion of the pie chart when it comes to regionals and treasure cups, but keep in mind that EB-02 is only lasting for a month, but this leader will be rather strong in OP11 as well. But for the next month or so, it should be wreaking havoc. But don't fret, there are answers to it. One of those answers for me is the OP1 Zoro. I actually think that he still belongs in the S tier. I put him at the top of S tier post ban list, and I think that he's very strong overall. We haven't seen him perform amazingly well, but the people that have piloted him have done well this split. I expect him to do really well in EB-02. He does get a piece of support from EB-02 with the 3-cost chopper. I don't know if that's necessarily going to change the identity of the deck. It's still a strong aggro deck overall. You can go a couple of ways. You can go with the animal build. You can also go with the 1-drop spam. But the thing here is that Zoro swings for 6s quite often, and with the baseline stat of GP Luffy being 6k leader, this is going to be very difficult for GP Luffy to have to counter out of a bunch of small attacks coming their way, and then have to figure out if it is worth going after the bodies or going for life instead. That's the power of Zoro. Because of that, I think Zoro's in a really strong spot, so I'm going to put him in the S tier, or at least keep him in the S tier. Blackbeard is going to be an S tier deck still, but the problem with Blackbeard is that he just gets run over by GP Luffy. The new 6-cost Rush Luffy that Purple gets just makes a lot of decks stronger and makes Teach have a horrible time when that card hits the field. Of course, you can play things like Liberation and get it off the field if you can, but unfortunately that might not be enough, or quick enough rather. But I do think Blackbeard is still a really strong leader. I don't think he's near the top of the S tier. I think he still belongs in S tier, but I would put him towards the bottom end of S tier for now, just because GP Luffy is going to be able to run him over. Zoro is going to be able to run him over. But the thing is, it might be a little bit of a triangle meta where we see decks like Lucci or black decks like Smoker, maybe even Rebecca, start to pop up a little bit and be able to answer GP Luffy, because everybody's trying to answer GP Luffy, right? And if those decks start to be a little bit more prominent, then we'll see Blackbeard be able to answer those decks. And so we will probably have a little bit of a triangle for a month, but at least to start off with. But I expect GP Luffy to be the best deck, and then Zoro to be the one to kind of answer it. Shanks definitely took full advantage of this ban list going into OP10, being probably the strongest and most represented deck into a lot of the treasure cups and regionals that I've been keeping my eye on. In fact, I played played in a regional just recently, and out of 10 rounds, I faced 6 Shanks, which was quite crazy to come across that many. But I guess it's to be expected with how popular the leader is from both the anime and manga, but also just the deck is really strong and easy to pilot, get into, and it has really strong cards overall. I think it still remains strong. I think it might go more into a control style build into the EB-02 meta to start answering GP Luffy a little bit easier, and if that's the case, it will have a rough matchup against Blackbeard, but it will have a pretty good matchup against GP Luffy. Zoro might be a little bit easier for it with the control build, and so I expect Shanks to still be a strong deck. So Shanks doesn't change too much overall. I'm going to keep him in the S tier. On to Bonney, though. I think Bonney, even though Bonney gets like a 7-cost Bonney character, it doesn't really, I don't think it plays super well into what the deck is trying to do. The blocker that comes out in OP12, which we'll get to eventually, is much better for this deck overall. I do think Bonney is a strong leader, but I don't quite think she's going to be in a spot where she's wanting to be played quite often. When you have decks like Shanks being a direct answer to Bonney, and then Shanks is super prominent. I will say, though, that the 8-cost kid is a great answer to GP Luffy, and if that's the case, Bonney does stand a chance against GP Luffy, although I don't think she's quite meta-defining. I would probably put her down to the A tier. I don't know where at in the A tier quite yet. We'll put her in the top of A tier for now and maybe adjust it as we go, but as we do go, just because they are listed in certain areas, usually I try to go S through B to be the most like in order of what is competitive. Like for instance, the top of S is going to be the best. When we get to C, it doesn't really matter too much, like it just is a hodgepodge of everything, but maybe A for now will also be kind of like that. Lim did really well in OP10, but we saw her do well for like a weekend or two, and then she just kind of fell off after that. I know that a lot of Europeans were playing Lim with a very interesting Orochi package, and I thought that was really smart to be able to like look through their deck. I don't think that she really changes much from EB-02, to be quite honest. So I think that because, well, we've seen her fall off a little bit. She's strong. People know how to like answer her, and she's very dice roll dependent. I'm going to take her out of the S tier for EB-02 because of the fact that she can be a little bit inconsistent with how strong she is. She's a very strong deck overall, regardless. But if she goes first, she's absolutely nuts. If she goes second, it's an uphill battle for a lot of players. So I'm going to put Lim down in the A tier. I'm feeling like a low A right now, but it could be moved around depending on everything else. Belo Betty is still a very strong deck overall. If they high roll, they just blow everybody out of the water. It's one of those that's a feast or famine deck, and we're going to see a lot of Belo Betty in OP11, so keep her in the back of your mind. I think for now, for the EB-02 meta, she's still a really good pick. Being able to pump up all of her characters by 3,000 by just pitching a card is an insanely strong effect. Of course, you're going down on resources, but honestly, Belo Betty tries to close the game out before she gets closed out herself. So I guess that's the point of the game anyway, right? So anyway, Belo Betty, I will remain in the A tier. I'll keep her in the A tier here, but I think we haven't really seen her perform on a regional or treasure cup level quite yet, but I do think she is really, really viable. Okay, so Rebecca was my cope deck for OP10, and I played a lot of Rebecca during that time, testing out a lot of builds, and when she sees the pieces she needs, here's the thing. I always say this when certain decks come around. I'm like, oh, when they see the pieces they need, they're going to be amazing. And I think that's just true for any deck, right? Especially for Rebecca, though. The problem with Rebecca is that obviously she doesn't apply any pressure with her leader ability. So that is a big hindrance. And I know that Cross AI has been trying to work on a Rebecca list, and I think he did well with one of them, top 32ing at a regional. But boy, that list was insanely strange. Good for him. Every Rebecca list is very different, of course. But I think that if other people try to pilot Rebecca, I don't think it's going to do so well. I do think she has a lot of potential, but I definitely was coping when I put her at the A tier in OP10. I definitely think she's still strong, but I think she's probably towards the B tier, bottom of competitive. I think she's a pick that you could probably take. And if you really practice it well, know your matchups, find the right sauce, she can really do well against a lot of these leaders, but it's kind of tough out here in the meantime. Purple Luffy is extremely strong, actually, and I think he belongs either at the top of A or the bottom of S. I think Purple Luffy has been doing a lot of damage over time, where we've seen Purple Luffy top a lot of OP10 events, And I don't think that he really takes advantage of anything from EB-02 off the top of my head, but he is just a generically strong leader. And as a result, I'm going to put him at the bottom of S tier. He might change as we go through the rest of this, but based off of the just feeling alone right now, I think he's pretty strong. Smoker is going to be the best answer to GP Luffy, but the problem is that Smoker just kind of folds to some other decks. Like, I feel like when I'm playing Shanks against Smoker, I'm doing really well as Shanks, and especially if I'm doing a control build. I think other leaders have definitely been able to overwhelm Smoker because of the fact that Smoker's a 4-life leader. I think the biggest advantage here is that they do take advantage of the 8-cost kid, can play it down a turn early, and then put the Dawn underneath it. So when GP Luffy's trying to steamroll opponents, that they can't necessarily do that when an 8-cost kid is on the field. So as a result, Red-Green Smoker is definitely an amazing deck to be able to counter GP Luffy. And as we saw in the East, it ended up winning one of the, I guess it was like a national or maybe a regional. I'm not exactly sure what those championships are the equivalent of for the West, but it ended up winning against a whole sea of GP Luffy in the EB-02 meta. On to Usopp. This was the deck that I have been piloting very ferociously for the entirety of OP10, and it is a deck that is... as I play it, I get really like more and more tilted. Here's the thing. I really enjoy this deck. It's one of my favorite decks outside of Rebecca. I think maybe just blue-black as a leader would be amazing. You know, any blue-black leader is just good in my opinion. But the problem with Usopp is his consistency. The problem finding your pieces all the time to be able to do what you need to do is hard. I do think that he is always going to be a strong leader, but the problem is he loses to himself more often than not. I think with EB-02, Usopp makes a few changes to the deck, not necessarily from EB-02 though. I think that Usopp looks to put in more of like Lumbus or cost reducers in the deck to be able to handle things like Sanji and Pudding with a stage on them. I think Usopp's still a really good deck. We'll still see it around, but I'm going to put it towards the tail end of I don't know if it's worse than Lim or not, but it's just, they're both dice rolly decks to be quite honest. Yellow Kid's just a strong yellow deck overall. I think that with this leader, we have seen it kind of like rise up in some competitive formats where it has been able to like finish top 32, do relatively well overall. And I think it will continue to do that. The yellow support that comes out is mostly tailored for Sky Island. There is a 5-cost blocker Sanji, which is pretty good when you're at 2 life or less. You're able to draw 2 trash 1. But I don't know if Kid really takes advantage of that or really needs to use that because of the fact that they have blockers built into all of your supernovas. So I think Kid is still a strong deck. I'm going to leave him probably, actually I might move him down to the competitive. I don't necessarily see him topping too many events. Maybe 1 or 2 will get in there and do well, but I think he's more of a B tier deck than anything else. He is really strong, don't get me wrong. He's probably at the same tier list or maybe same level as like Usopp almost. I think if Usopp sees really high end stuff that, or like sees the nuts, that Usopp is got a much higher ceiling, whereas like Kid doesn't necessarily have a huge ceiling, but the floor is a lot higher for this deck than a lot of other decks, and because of that, it's still a strong, solid deck to take to tournaments. Doffy has just not died. The thing is, this leader with Jinbei was amazing, and without Jinbei it is amazing. We've seen it just do really well in a lot of tournaments. It will be an event-topping deck for sure. I think it's one of those that it has a lot of consistency to it, being able to find its pieces, cheat out bodies, and I think that it will continue to do well. I think that it does have some issues against GP Luffy. It does well against a whole slew of the decks that are in the top area. It just depends, you know, on the dice roll for a lot of these decks. I think you want to kind of go first with Doffy no matter what, but I think if you're going against GP Luffy, it's going to be somewhat of a tough matchup just because it's a little bit easier for GP Luffy to counter out of the 7s coming their way. But regardless, I think that Doffy still has a place in this meta. As we've seen in OP10, it's been doing really well. I think it'll continue to just do as strong as it has been for EB-02. All right, looking at the rest of the competitive tier right now, I think the Boa is relatively unchanged. She doesn't get too much support. I think she's still a strong deck. Same thing with Red Purple Luffy. He is a great answer to Shanks. Marco doesn't get much either in red or blue for what I'm thinking of for at least Whitebeard Pirates. So I think Marco is still a competitive deck overall. Buggy, is yet to be seen to be better than it is. I think it'll get stronger when the starter decks come out, but we're not quite there yet. I do think it is probably towards the tail end of competitive, maybe towards where Rebecca is. So we can bump Buggy down a little bit, but maybe that will change once the starter decks come out. Starter deck 21, Luffy is, I don't know if it's necessarily a great pick overall. I think it's probably, there's times where it can do well, but I just haven't seen it do well recently. So I'm going to leave it, I'm going to move it rather. I think we can probably put it down to a rogue tier. And same thing with Sanji. Sanji's a great answer to things like Blackbeard. But the problem with Sanji is that Sanji just sometimes kind of only plays one body a turn and then runs out of steam if you attack into it. But it is a really good deck against certain, you know, if certain metas arise, I think that Sanji could be good. We'll put him in the rogue tier though. I think he bumps down from competitive. Not that anything really changed for these decks, but as the meta has progressed, I just don't see these decks doing as well as maybe I intended for them to do when I first saw like what they could do or the support they came out with. So my opinion of them has changed a little bit over the past like month or so. Okay, on to Carrot. I think Carrot is actually a pretty good leader right now. The fact that she gets a couple pieces of support that she can really take advantage of, one of them being able to search out her stage, which is really good. And then the second thing is she can take advantage of the 7-cost Bonney being able to stun lock something, which is kind of like Carrot's thing, right? Carrot wants to like rest 5-cost and then stun them down, but being able to stun down bigger targets is even better. So the 7-cost Bonney is really good in Carrot. The 1-cost Searcher, Carrot Searcher, being able to find Zo or Zoo. I think it's Zo Island or Zo. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I always mess that up. So anyway, Carrot is definitely going to be still a strong deck. I think she's competitive. I just don't think a lot of people are trying to pilot her for whatever reason. But I think that she's worth trying out at least. She could be a sleeper pick. I'm going to keep her at the bottom of B tier. Black Smoker and Black Lucci, both of these I think are, with Moria banned, I thought that they were going to be hit really hard, but I still thought that they were good decks. And so I kept them in the competitive tier, but I do think that their time to rise up is now. I think that they will be at the top of competitive tier. Both Smoker and Lucci both play kind of a different play style. Smoker leans more into the navy, one body, like even tall bodies removal. Lucci still kind of does the wide board removal. So like with the 4-cost Lucci being able to remove 2 bodies a turn, that's pretty nice. You can also put in the 8-cost Sabo to remove more bodies. I think the thing is both of these decks have a wonderful matchup into GP Luffy, being able to just remove things pretty easily, even with stage. So as a result, I think these two will be bumped up. I don't think that these two are necessarily event topping quite yet. Lucci, you could make an argument for, so maybe Lucci could be at the top of competitive, maybe even event topping, maybe A tier. I could be wrong here, but I do think that these are wonderful picks. Don't get me wrong, and I didn't even say this at the beginning of the video, but the way that the tier list is structured out, we have S through F tier. S tier are the decks that I consider to be ones that will be a big part of the pie chart in regionals or treasure cups. These will be decks that will be consistently at the top. We won't be surprised to see a large amount of players playing them and doing well with them. A tier decks are decks that will probably be a smaller part of that pie chart, whether it's like 6%, 5%, but they're still a well-represented deck and probably being able to be in the top 16 at some points in the future. B tier decks are also kind of in that same realm, more so in the top 32. We will see less of these, probably not even seeing a face in an Eggman video for any of these, but I do think that these have viability to do well in metas. And then of course, like the C tier, these are decks that you might want to, rogue decks are probably ones that you could probably mess around with and come up with a good build, but might be competitive, but probably are not. And then the C tier, that's just a, not C plus, but just a C, leave it locals. These are decks that you just leave it, exactly that. Leave it your locals. Don't bring them to competitive events. Maybe mess with them at locals, have some fun there. And then F tier is just decks that, why would you want to play those in my opinion? Of course, this is my opinion, so just take it with a grain of salt, but that is the tier list. I forgot to explain at the beginning of the video. So back to where we were at, that should conclude what was in the B tier here. Let's look at the C plus tier really fast. We already have these here. Red, Yellow, Sabo, still really good. I think that this deck is probably still going to be the king of Rogue. I think he's really popular with a small subset of players, and I think that there's something about this deck that just hasn't been unlocked in a big tournament. I don't know what it is, but like something with like the Rush Luffy, the Rush Aces, being able to use the kids to bring them out is a really cool feature with this deck. There's other ways to build it with the Rev Army, of course. So Red Yellow Sabo, I will continue to keep in the C+ tier. Red Green Oden gets a nice piece of support with the 6th cost Yamato, which gives a leader, if you are a Land of Wano or a ace leader, you can give one Dawn. You can give one Dawn to that leader, and then of course with Oden's ability being having, if you have a 5 cost or higher Land of Wano card on the field, you gain an additional 1,000 power for the entirety of the next turn. So you're swinging for 7, and then the 6 cost Yamato has Rush, which is really nice as well. This deck is really powerful, but the problem is it's also kind of a feast or famine. If you go first, it's a lot harder to do well with. Not saying it's hard to do well with this deck going first, but this deck definitely wants to go second. Being able to play Hiyori on 4, cheat out a 5 cost, assumably an Izo, so you can get one Dawn underneath your leader and swing in for 7, and then be defensively a 6,000 power body, and then on the 6th Dawn turn, play out the new Yamato, on 8, play out Dragon, so on and so forth until you're just closing the game out with Hody Jones. So I do think that this is a really strong deck. I want to leave it in the C+ tier, but I want to bump it up. I'm actually going to put it above Sabo because I do think that this leader is worth exploring. I think that it's actually a pretty strong pick overall, but I don't think it's going to be a super competitive deck, unfortunately, because of that, but I do think it's a really strong deck regardless. Chopper got 2 pieces of support in this next EB-02 set, and both in green and red, which are Chopper characters, which you can actually really spam the board quite quickly with this leader. I don't think it's going to be a leader that a lot of people are going to be playing, though, especially at a competitive tournament. So I'm going to move Chopper up here because of the new support. I definitely think he's worth exploring a lot more. He's potentially one that could take some games off people and take people by surprise, but it's probably better to play Zoro if you're wanting to go like spam the board, but this is a very spam the board leader and it's very fun. So worth checking out. Could be worth playing in a competitive setting. I skipped over Uta because I think Uta is kind of just the same. It hasn't really changed too much. It's a really strong deck. It has a really good consistency going on with it, with the fact that it just draws off the top of its deck. Really good into Shanks, but I don't think we're going to see this too often in competitive settings. Maybe here and there, but I'm going to leave it in the rogue tier because of that. Same thing with Nami. We saw it top, but the person that topped with it's just known for being a really good Nami player. I think Nami is in a good spot in the meta right now, but I don't think that a lot of people are going to want to play her nearly as much. Who knows? Maybe she has a good matchup into GP Luffy because GP Luffy's hitting for like 6s and 7s and things like that. So there's a potential where Nami could be a good answer to it because of that. But we'll see. Red Purple Kid is actually in an interesting spot here where all of the multicolored purple leaders can actually take advantage of the new 6 cost Luffy. I think Kid could be a good leader to run that with because you're just hitting face really hard, and having a restand Luffy's pretty nice. He could be a strong leader overall. I don't think he's going to be amazing. I'm going to keep him in the C+ rogue tier, and once again, these are kind of just like off of feeling. It doesn't really matter exactly where in the tier list they are, but I'm going to put him at the bottom for now and maybe move him around afterwards. Red Purple Sugar is also I think she's actually much better than Rogue. Actually, no, that's not true. She's not much better than Rogue. She is in Rogue. I think she's a deck that will cause problems for a lot of people. Her defensive capabilities are insane. The only problem with her is she doesn't have much board presence, so that is an issue, of course, but she does have a lot of defensive tools to be able to survive long enough to at least build up a board over time. So I'm going to bump her up in the C+ rogue tier. Green Yellow Law is not really changed here. I think we'll see him do well in maybe the OP11 meta. I know that in China he's been doing really well. Not that anything's really changed for him too much, but I think the fact that he runs Hody Jones to be able to answer things, go really wide with a bunch of 6K bodies could be good. He goes down in life really easily though, so if you have boards that go really wide, Green Yellow Law could be in some trouble. So if you have decks like Green Purple Luffy and Zoro, of course, they go really wide, Green Yellow Law might have some issues with that. But I do think he's a really strong leader. I'm going to bump him up above I think he's more competitive and more viable than these leaders over here, so I'm going to put him around the top of C+ Rogue tier. Enel, one of the cockroaches of the meta, but also one of my favorite decks to play, just because it's a fun yellow deck. I know a lot of people don't find it fun to play against, but it is a fun leader regardless. I do think he is worth exploring now because of the 10 cost Rush Enel. You also get the 5 cost Sanji blocker. Those two things make him worth playing, and I think he's a competitive leader. I think he could probably be around this tier in the competitive list. I don't think he's in the rogue tier anymore because of the 10 cost Rush Enel is just insane. Raigo being removed from the deck hurts this deck a lot, but he does have more aggressive tools now, and he can go and switch up his gameplay. Instead of being a starve leader, he can actually be one that's more aggressive and then hide behind the fact that his leader ability keeps him alive longer than it should. All right, Ace, I am sad to say, Vampire, if you're watching this, please don't be upset, but I'm going to leave him at locals. He does get the 6 cost Yamato, but I don't think that's enough for him to be a rogue tier deck. There's not much that makes me excited about this Ace leader, even though I played him a lot when he first came out. He was one of my favorite leaders to play. I thought the idea of playing around events was really cool, but yeah, unfortunately, he's just not a super strong leader compared to everything else in the meta right now. If you're going to play red, you have more options that will be, I think, more consistent, stronger, and probably hold up better over time. Green Purple Doffy is going to remain in rogue tier. He also can take advantage of the 6 cost Luffy. I don't know if any are running in his list, but you can, and as a result, you probably should. I think that that character is incredibly busted. I think if you are a multicolored purple leader, you should just be running it. It's just one of those cards that it defines the meta. It's just so good. It's just being able to restand itself, take a life. You know, I think it's better in Gum Gum Giant leaders because of the fact that you can kind of hide behind the fact that it's like, oh, come at me, I have 1 or 2 Dawn open. What could it be? Gum Gum Giant. Doffy's not like that, but Doffy does have good defensive capabilities with it restanding 2 Dawn. With the new 8 cost Doffy into the 5 cost Rosie, if you want to run that. Some people have opted not to. That's also an option for this leader as well. I think it's pretty good. I think it remains in rogue tier. We've yet to see it really do well in a tournament though, so maybe that will change. On to Rosinante. I think Rosinante is getting some interesting support. He gets a new 2 cost that spits out bodies, and honestly, this leader has already been really annoying to play against. I have always really enjoyed playing this leader. I feel sorry for my opponents when I do play this leader, and the fact that it gets a new piece of support that just makes it even harder to remove bodies off the field. And what I mean by harder to remove, the new piece of support it gets is a 2 cost Rosie that it basically just looks at the top of the deck, it finds a 2 cost and spits it out for basically free, just sideways, and the fact that you can just protect it with your leader ability being a blocker is really annoying. So this is quite a nuisance. It spits out things like sugar, spits out things like the Rosie blocker. So there's a lot of really good things that it can spit out, and it's really annoying. And honestly, this leader is much better because of it. I'm going to put him towards the top of the rogue tier. On to Kata. I think Kata belongs in more of a competitive tier than rogue. I think that he doesn't get too much from EB-02, but I just think that the leader, after playing against it for quite a while recently, I've noticed that it's just a good generic yellow leader. The ability just being able to boost your leader up by 1,000, look at either you or your top life, is always going to be good. And you can run Big Mom Pirates, you can run new things like the 8 cost Kid, you can even run the Sanji blocker if you want. I don't think you're going to want to, but you could. But overall, Cat is probably a better leader than I initially thought. Unfortunately, Linlin is kind of just a worse version of Cat, so I'm going to actually put Linlin at the Leave It Locals. She's not bad, don't get me wrong, she's a good leader because she just has like generically good yellow stuff to play, but just play Cat if you're going to play one of them. Foxy is another rogue tier deck that I think remains in the rogue tier, probably, I guess, where it was. I think it's fine where it was. It's going to be really good against like Doffy, but Doffy's not necessarily as prominent as it was, even though it's still an A tier deck in my opinion. You can lock things down like the leader from GP Luffy and maybe also a Sanji and Pudding, but does that really matter if they have a bunch of things on the board? You don't really have removal in Foxy. Foxy's more of one of those decks that grinds out the opponent, but it is a strong deck regardless, and worth noting that you could probably take it to a tournament and do all right with, but I wouldn't expect to win a tournament with this leader, but it's much better than a Leave It Locals deck for sure. Same thing with Queen. I think Queen has some new support from EB-02 that it can take advantage of, whether it wants to run like the new VV that draws a couple of cards for it. You could actually end up using that to your advantage if you want. I don't know if many people are going to be adding it to the deck, but you could. And there's other things you can add into the deck as well, like the blocker Sanji that draws 2 trash 1. That's very nice as well. I think that Queen just remains a relatively interesting control deck, but I don't think that Queen's necessarily super strong at the grand scheme of things. So I'm going to put Queen down at the bottom of the C+ rogue tier. I don't think it's a leave it locals deck though. I think it's worth at least, you know, giving it a little bit more respect than that. Vegapunk is insane right now. I actually think Vegapunk is a highly competitive deck. I want to put Vegapunk towards the middle of the B tier, maybe towards even the top of the B tier. It gets a new 5-cost Vegapunk blocker that basically finds a scientist in the top 5, spits it out, and then on top of that, if your opponent has 2 or less characters, you have to pitch a card. That sucks, but you know what? You're spitting bodies out. And I played against a Vegapunk that had like 3 life. And I think they had like 3 or 4 blockers, and the life they had was like the 1-cost event. And I was like swinging into them. They blocked. The next thing was like a 1-cost event. They brought the blocker back out. I swung again. They blocked. The next event, the next life was an event. Brought the blocker out. They blocked. It was insane. I couldn't go for lethal that turn, and I had a board full of like big swings too, which was insane that Vegapunk could at least survive for that long. It's a really strong aggro deck, and I think the support that it gets just makes it even more competitive than what it was initially. I think it could be one of those decks that actually is going to probably do well in a tournament. I really want this deck to do well. It could be better than competitive, but I think we'll leave it in competitive for now and see how it does within the next month. Reiju is a lot better than C+ Rogue tier. I think the fact that she kind of removes most of the Vinsmoke package, or I guess the Germa 66 package, and she kind of just runs the Reiju and the Ichiji spam package, makes her a lot stronger. She has a rough matchup against Blackbeard, but if she doesn't face Blackbeard, I think she's a very strong deck. Maybe slightly better than Vegapunk. I think she's maybe slightly worse than Vega. I don't know. She's around here. She's a competitive deck. She's not a rogue deck. I think she's much better than what I thought she was initially. I think that the way you play her has changed over time. You take Judge out altogether, and you kind of just go Ichiji spam and just pray that you miss Blackbeard. Oden with the new Oden combo, still a really good deck. Rogue tier for sure. We'll leave him here. Nico Robin, I think, deserves a little bit better than this with the new 6-cost Luffy. She can actually run this, search it out, and then be able to play it and then heal if she needs to, if she's taking life. I think she's actually much better than this. We're going to probably bump her up here. Probably here. I think she's not better than... I think this is a really strong deck. This is probably... Yeah, they're probably on the equal playing field. Sabo and Robin are probably around the same power level. I think both of these are really strong decks, but will they do well in a competitive setting? Yeah, maybe. Or probably not. Not too much has changed for Yamato, but she is really a strong deck regardless, so we'll leave Yamato here. Blue-green Sanji and Zoro actually gets quite a few pieces of support over EB-02, whether it's like the VV that they can play down and then bounce it back to hand. They're drawing cards. There's other cards as well within this set that you can play that are specifically made for Sanji and Zoro, but I think that this leader is definitely a rogue tier deck. I don't know if it's much better because of the cards that come out. I think that I thought this leader was fine regardless, but now it's just kind of like, it was like in a spot where if it didn't get support soon, I thought it would be at Leave It Locals, but because it got support, we're just going to keep it in the rogue tier for now. Sad to say, Vivi is going to be moved to the Leave It Locals tier, even though she does get her own like VV card that draws a couple of cards for her, and she can take advantage of anything in blue and red right now. I think that she just really hasn't... I mean, she's a leader that it can't attack, right? That's always a problem. And yeah, I'm looking at Rebecca, I'm looking at Iceberg here, but I think Vivi right now just... It's like in a weird spot where you're not applying a lot of pressure with Vivi at all, and you're playing one body turn. It does have Rush, sure. You have Cavendish, which is good. You have like pieces that can stun, like Boa. You have things that can remove from the field, like 10-cost Shanks, 8-cost Rayleigh. But not much has changed for the deck outside of that. You can go with the animal package as well and be more like spam the board, and that could be a good version as well, but Sad to say, I just don't think she is worth putting in the rogue tier for now. Maybe with a change or two in the future, she could be better. But she'll be one that I'll still play with. Don't get me wrong. I think she's still fine, but I don't think she's highly competitive. Kind of same thing with Iceberg. Not much has changed for Iceberg, and I don't think anything is going to change for Iceberg for a little while. I think he's a fine leader, worth at least playing, testing out, having some fun with, but I don't think he's quite an amazing deck. So we'll leave him in the Leave It Locals. I think he needs some more help, maybe some top end to be a rogue tier deck. He needs something to like sneak back up into the rogue tier, in my opinion. What does keep in this rogue tier is Garp, because of the new 7-cost Sengoku blocker that brings a 4-cost Navy out. Garp can take good advantage of that. There's a few other pieces that Garp can use within this new EB-02 set. I like Garp overall. I think Garp will be a deck that could be one you could cook with. I think C+ Rogue is like decks that you could cook with and probably maybe take some people by surprise. Maybe that's another way to think of it. Garp is definitely there. I think Red Green Law is always going to be in the rogue tier. I don't think anything will change from that. It does get pieces of support that it can use right now. It gets a Nami searcher, a green Nami searcher. It can use some of the chopper support if it wants to go animal style. So yeah, ultimately Red Green Law just kind of stays the same. Whitebeard, I think, is, as we've seen, it finished second. I was going to say topped at an event. I think that this deck is... It's just consistently a 6K leader, 6K life, draws cards every turn. It's good, right? That's just good. It has really good stuff. If it sees its curve, it's amazing. If it doesn't, it can be rough at times, especially if there's blue decks that are taking over the meta. But I think Whitebeard, definitely easy rogue tier, even potentially competitive. But I think that will put him at the top of the rogue tier right now. Okay, so really quickly, so we're not spending too much longer on any of these other leaders. Let's go through these rather quickly because I do think a few of these do get some pieces of support that they can take advantage of. And if I miss anything in particular, please let me know in the comments below. But let's go through this rather fast. I think the big things here that we're going to be looking at would be the Black Purple Luffy. This leader actually takes full advantage of this 6-cost Rush Luffy. And as a result, I think it has a potential to be a really strong deck. Will it be a competitive deck? I don't think it will be quite there. I think it's going to actually be the top of the rogue tier because of the fact that the 6-cost Luffy just changes things for this deck. You have a whole new identity. Before, I thought with like 8-cost Moria gone, it was going to be a problem, but not at all. The fact that you now can be full rush, you can go and you can ramp up to 6 or 7 really fast, play out the 6-cost Rush Luffy, play out a 7-cost Rush Sanji, play out a 9-cost Rush Luffy, play out a 10-cost Time Walk Luffy, is really good. And you're hiding behind Gum Gum Giants because you're purple and a Straw Hat leader. So yeah, I think this is a rogue tier deck, potentially even a competitive deck. This is one I'm super excited to actually work with. I've been trying to test it out myself, and I've been having a lot of fun with this leader. And I think with the starter decks, this leader will only get better. Looking at the multicolored purple decks, you can probably just bump these up here. Just not that it matters, but we'll show some respect here because of the fact that they can take advantage of these. I'm sorry, but the rest of these I'm not too keen on. I do think that this Luffy could potentially be cooked with because of the new Nami Searcher. We do get some chopper support. Red Green's really good. And then Hody Jones also, I think with the Arlong, could take advantage of the... that Arlong that comes out. And also, I didn't mention this, but blue, green, Zoro, and Sanji, because they're East blue, also can use that. So that's worth noting as well. I think the rest of these, maybe even Croc, because it's multi-purple, could come up a little bit. Sabo has been performing, 1 or 2 Sabo decks have been performing quite well here and there. So I'm going to show some respect to it as well and move it up to the rogue tier. We'll bump these up a little bit. Not too much though. We'll just 1 or 2 spots. These decks still kind of suck. So we'll leave it at locals. Starter deck 14 Luffy. I think that some people have been cooking with this a little bit. We'll bump it up a little bit from what I've seen. With the 7-cost Sengoku, you can actually take advantage of that as well because you can run a Navy package with the starter deck 14 Luffy. Worth noting. We'll bump Pudding up a little bit here. We'll move it with the other ones. I actually think Pudding maybe in OP11 could be better. I guess it actually didn't, just stayed where it was at. Okay, never mind. Kalgara is one that I'm super excited to see actually do well here. I think it actually is going to be a competitive deck. I think this is a deck that, because it also runs Sky Island support, can search out the 10 cost Rationale pretty easily. And I think that obviously it's meant for these two leaders, the Enel and the Kalgara. I think with Black kind of being taken down a notch, Kalgara has a better time now, can fill the board pretty easily and not have to worry about them being removed. 10 cost Rationale is really going to be a thorn in a lot of people's side, and Kalgara is one of the leaders that can use it really well. We'll bump King up a little bit. I do think that King has an interesting synergy with the 5 cost Sanji and Pudding with his ability to -2 to draw a card. You can get some of that Dawn back. So that's worth noting. Is it worth moving up to a higher tier? I don't think so. Z is kind of just where Z's at. I think Z could be cooked on a little bit, but we'll move him up 1. Sorry, Dragon, we'll move him up 1. It doesn't really matter. None of these matter. Like, all of these are pretty much, you know, going to be remotely the same. I'm going to move Blue Yellow Ace up to Rogue tier. I'm also going to move the Arlong up to Rogue tier, though, because the 3 cost Arlong belongs in this deck. I think it's going to be worth playing here. Also, Blue Yellow Ace gets a 5 cost Blue Ace that searches out a 2 cost kid, so that's going to be really good for this leader. Both of those pieces of support from EB-02 make these decks potentially worth playing. Looking at the rest here, I feel like we're pretty much, we'll bump Kuro up a little bit. He's East Blue. He might have, I don't know, some viability eventually. And I think looking at the rest here, yeah. Okay, so here we have it. I think this is a pretty comfortable EB-02 tier list. This is where I see kind of the meta landing over the next month or so. I think that we're going to continue to see, I think we'll see GP Luffy take the helm and be the best deck in the format. And I think we'll see some of these other decks around it rise up and do pretty well overall. The deck that I'm super excited to see perform is Vegapunk and Black Purple Luffy. I think both of these are worth keeping an eye on just to potentially maybe do something. Same thing with Kalgara. I think there might be something there. Overall, I think the list is pretty solid, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. What leaders do you think belong where? Did I get most of these right? But regardless, no matter what, EB-02 is looking pretty fun and fresh. I'm excited to have some decks to cook with here. We'll have some new content on the horizon within the next week or so, so be on the lookout for that. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.